take me in a time capsule, bring me back to yourself as a younger child, preteen, teen, I believe, when you get these cancer diagnoses. And, and I've watched some videos and read some things about your reaction, but I'm almost more curious about how you developed the, almost like the process, like mentally and emotionally and holistically as a human, health wise, especially at that young age. And if it, to process a terrible development that you have no control over, and to almost like have a process to make it through that. Like, what was it like for you to learn those things? What was the process you developed maybe early on when you were younger, and maybe how did that process change come the second diagnosis and when you got a little older? Really just curious, like what you manifested to make it through, like almost your process, your Bible. What was it like?
Well, I think it was just repetition, and I think it was looking at things from a different perspective. And it was knowing that I couldn't do anything about the cancer, and I knew that I had the illness. So as opposed to looking at what I didn't do or what I didn't have, what I couldn't do, I focused on what I could do. And I think so many people in life forget about that. They complain. They're so negative. Like, well, I can't do this. I can't do that. You know what? You can't or you won't. That's a great question you should ask yourself. And I think for me, I looked at all the stuff that I couldn't do. I was like, okay, well, why would I want to even focus on that? So I focused on what I could do. And I think what I started doing was developing positive habits based on what meant most to me. Family, my health, my friends. So I started making, obviously with the help of my mom and my dad, because I was so young, 13, and then maybe later on in my life, it became a habit, but making decisions based on what meant most to me, making conscious decisions, being very mindful of what I was doing. And I think by over time, through the compound effect, I really started developing a life that took me on the right path. Yes, there were times when I was, over here doing stuff that I shouldn't be doing, getting in trouble, TPing the coaches, the track coach's front yard and his trees and everything. But my values kept bringing me back to who I was, and helped me make those conscious decisions. And I think over time, human beings are a lot of times on cruise control. And I think what we need to do is just slow down and start looking at the decisions that we make, because the decisions that we make today affect who we are tomorrow. And I knew that the decisions I made while I was going through my treatment would affect my treatment the next day. So if I ate garbage, and if I didn't exercise, I knew that when I went in for my chemotherapy treatments and the radiation treatments, that my body wouldn't handle it as well as it could have. So I wanted to prepare myself for that. And all those little tiny decisions added up to who I am now. Mm-hmm. And I think it also helped just bookending my day on a positive note, waking up, being grateful for what I was about to do that day, and then going to bed, saying my prayers, being, thank you for this, thank you for that. Again, being grateful. And I was starting off my morning on a grateful note, ending it on a grateful note. And then also visualization played a huge part. I actually visualized myself inside my own body destroying the cancer cells.
One, you mentioned values. If you wouldn't mind specifying the values that your parents instilled in you, the values you had during the time period that was tough, the values you live by today. Maybe just list handful that are super important. And then just a second question. So that's one question. Second question, curious in both your personal life, but also maybe even like heroes in the sporting world as a kid, kind of a thing. Who were your like people you took your values from and mantras from, and the people you looked up to personally and in terms of like heroes in sports or life or whatever, that almost like you took a little bit from everyone to make who you were to get through the tough times. Like, so yeah, two questions. One on the values, two, who were the people who made you?
Well, it's kind of funny you asked about the values, because I actually put together it's called the Summit Challenge Journal.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, but go ahead. Yeah.
So yeah, it's actually the Summit Challenge, and on the inside, it's a core values assessment. And
Mm-hmm.
on the inside here, I have people figure out what their personal core values are. So it took me a long time to put this together. Not just my own values, but things I found online, from other websites, other research. And I found the most meaningful ones, which, there's acceptance, there's freedom, there's fitness, there's faith, family, excellence, personal growth. Just off the top of my head, those are some really big ones. Thankfulness, trustworthiness, uniqueness, wealth, wisdom. And I know there's health in there too, health and happiness. Those are huge. And I think those came in from both my mom and my dad. They were both very successful and amazing people. And as far as, who is kind of funny, when you were asking me the question, who was my inspiration when I was growing up, the first thing that came to my mind was actually a character that was portrayed by Christopher Reeve.
Mm-hmm.
Superman.
Superman.
So
Yep.
when I was younger, I actually collected Superman comics, and there was one where he died. He was killed, and he came back as 4 different Superman and Superboy, stuff like that. And looking at it from the DC world, I mean, it was fantastic, because now all of a sudden you have all these people who bought Superman comics. Now they have to buy 4 more or 3 more to keep up with what's going on. But I saw him, living an amazing life.
Mm-hmm.
And as a kid,
In real
he was
life, Chris Reeve.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's also a guy up in, I remember watching his movie on TV when I was 11 or 12. His name was Terry Fox. He was a Canadian who had, I believe it was osteosarcoma, and he had to have his leg amputated. And his goal was to run across Canada and raise $1 from each Canadian for cancer research. He made it to Thunder Bay and ended up getting a recurrence, and he ended up passing away. But he's a huge Canadian hero. And I remember when I was younger, I kind of imitated, as I was running around our house in Ohio, I imitated his run, because he had like he had a prosthetic leg that kind of
Mm-hmm.
clicked forward.
Mm-hmm.
So he was kind of skipping as he was running. And I remember doing that around the house, and Mom and Dad were like, "What are you doing? Run
Mm-hmm.
properly." I'm like, "I'm imitating Terry."
On these notes, obviously the focus on positivity is important. Obviously you have this almost calibration of your psyche you have, but I'm just curious, so we can share with readers and readers can look out for it in their own lives. What have you found over the years are the 2, 3, 4 things that almost like eat away and scratch away at your inner holistic strength, that calibrated psyche? So when I ask that, is it things like you take a break from exercising a couple days and you notice yourself slipping? Is it things like not speaking to people face to face and that affecting your psyche, being on the phone too much? I mean, what about life have you found, maybe in a handful of examples you could share, that would benefit readers, and maybe they should look out for in their own lives, are the things that you've always noticed, like, oh, I'm slipping a little bit here, and with that, what do you do to counteract those things and get back
Yeah,
to kind of homeostasis?
yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest one is, and I think this is for everybody. So the biggest one for me is if I'm let me put it this way: people who are depressed are living in the past. People who are anxious are living in the future. And people who are nervous and scared, which again happens to me too, it usually happens when I let my brain go wild. And I ask myself a question that it's literally 2 words: what if? What if whatever scenario happened? And when you do that, you immediately, I'll use myself, I immediately give my brain permission to go crazy. I'm like, okay, imagine the worst case scenario, and that's what's going to happen. And as soon as you ask yourself, what if this? What if this? I just start going down the rabbit hole. So I need to just take a break, do 5 deep breaths, 10 deep breaths, whatever, kind of bring myself back to the present. So I'm not living in the future. I'm not scared about what could happen, because what if it doesn't happen? So I think that's the biggest thing, and I think it also has to deal with self-doubt. So even though I've accomplished, what no human has ever accomplished before, I have self-doubt just like everybody else. I wonder, hey, with this whole COVID thing, am I ever going to get a speaking engagement again? Am I ever going to make any money again? Am I ever going to be able to take care of my family? What's going to happen? Am I going to be able to pay my mortgage? But that's also my brain asking that question, what if? What if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? And then it just kind of compounds on itself. So now I've learned to catch myself. The instant I give my brain permission, oh, hey, go crazy. Imagine every possible scenario out there. Like, okay, well, just stop, take a break, bring myself back to the present. And one of the best ways to do that is through your breath.
What's your advice? What do you share with people about, because this is really something that frankly resonates with me a lot, is even if you try your darndest, and as someone who's pretty well grounded in something like a CBT, we're living in such a whirlwind right now where people can have their entire existence in a blue light device of a phone, where it's almost like the world is rigged to get your mind racing like you just described. So again, keeping it conversational, I don't know, feel free to speak to some of the stuff I was just saying, because I just feel like right now with COVID, but especially when you compound COVID and staying home and a lot of that stuff with the drug that is the cell phone, in terms of getting your mind to totally race, what your advice is to people to find their center in this especially difficult time and continue to overcome.
People have to realize that there are certain triggers out there. Like you were talking about being on the phone, the blue light, all that stuff. When you're reading stuff on social media, when you're reading the news, when you're doing whatever online, it's the triggers that you have to be aware of. But when you have one of those triggers, you have to take 100% responsibility for your own actions. You can't blame those triggers. Those triggers didn't make you feel that way. How you reacted to that did. So you need to take 100% responsibility for your own actions and your own emotions, knowing, like I'm sure you've had this before, everybody has. Get into an argument and finally somewhere in the argument someone says, you see how you're making me feel? That's a load of garbage, because I'm not making you feel any certain way at all. What we're talking about may be making you uncomfortable, but how you're reacting is making you feel that certain way. A perfect example, also another example, the compound effect I mentioned earlier. Say somebody stays up all night long and they're binging on Netflix. So because they went to bed super late, their alarm goes off in the morning, they hit snooze 3 or 4 times, they're late for work, they get up, they probably don't have time to make coffee, they don't have time to make a healthy meal, so they stop on their way to some fast food joint, and we know how healthy that stuff is. So then they're going 90 miles an hour on the on-ramp to get to work because they're running 30 minutes to an hour late. All of a sudden they come smack into the middle of traffic that's not moving anywhere. Then they get pissed off at the traffic. It's not the traffic's fault. If you track it back, it was your own fault for not going to bed on time. Mm-hmm. So there are so many people that don't realize that it's how we react to those triggers. It's how we react to certain stimuli that make us feel that way, not the triggers of the stimuli itself. Nothing makes you feel a certain way except for you. And the instant you give the instant you give someone else power over your own emotions, you lose who you are. Mm-hmm. And I think so many people need to realize that. So they need to pay attention to what their triggers are and start changing how they react to those triggers and take responsibility, 100% owning their own situation and where they are.
Why did you develop this over recent months? Sounds like it may be downtime with COVID. This was something you wanted to work on. So what is it? How does it kind of fit contextually into all you've done? What's its purpose? Just share the need to know stuff about that, but also add on why you did it and that kind of thing.
It started off as an idea for taking people up Kilimanjaro and doing a 7-day immersive coaching experience on the mountain, which I'm hoping to do still once COVID ends, because I'm also a certified professional coach. And I wanted to use my skills and my life skills to help people on the mountain and use that as an immersive experience to change their lives. So that was going to be called the Ultimate Kilimanjaro Experience. And then all of a sudden this whole COVID thing came around. I was like, okay, well, why can't I make it an online program? So now what I did was I took that same concept and turned it into a 7-challenge program And it's basically a journey of self-empowerment through personal core values. And each challenge is 3 weeks long. And it helps people consciously develop the proper habits surrounding their own personal core values to help them live an abundant life, whatever that means to that person. And with the research that I've done with other programs is it's almost like homework. You know, you get a workbook and it's 4 inches thick. You have 19,000 things to do every day. You get confused, you get lost, you get frustrated, you throw it out the door, you throw it in the garbage can, you quit. And you revert back to what you were before when you were looking for these programs to help you change. So you got frustrated with the program, so you went back to who you were to begin with. So this is a program it's not, hey, I want to lose 15 pounds for my wedding and go back to who I was before. This is sustainable change, developing positive habits for a lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So yeah, feel free to expound on that. I know you touched on it there. What further makes it distinct? You know, what makes it special?
Well, I think what's special about it is it helps people hone in on their personal core values, and it helps people develop habits. So like the reason each challenge is 3 weeks long is because that's how long they say it takes to develop a habit, depending
Sure.
on how intense it is and
I've
everything
heard
else.
that. Yeah.
So you develop one habit, then you move on to the next challenge, develop another habit, and you move on to the next challenge, develop another habit. So by the time you're done, you have 7 new positive habits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, that's
So,
awesome.
but it's based on what means most to you, your personal core values. So the first thing is people have to figure out what those core values are, which is what
Sure.
this comes along with it. So it's something that you want to do as opposed to something that you have to do. And
Mm-hmm.
you understand and figure out which proverbial carrot means most to you as you're moving
Mm-hmm.
forward in life. I mean, if you don't like carrots or you don't like, you put a burger out there if you like burgers, figure
Yeah.
out what it is.